I'm thankful for the opportunity to bring this issue to light, as painful as it is. I'm honored to be one who helps others see and hear how important it is to understand that abuse isn't limited to physical actions. I grew up under the phrase, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me." And when I was a child, that rhetoric seemed acceptable because we are taught only to believe what we see, and what we cannot see is illegitimate. Thoughts, emotions, beliefs, etc. That phrase could not be more incorrect. I don't care how many times you say it. Words and emotion affect humanity in ways far more impact than physical discomfort ever could. Suffering reverberates its energy, bringing the collective to a lower frequency, therefore affecting all of existence. I am currently facing criminal trial. I left my home in 2019 and I placed my children with other trusted people for their safety. I didn't understand abuse and what it does and what it causes a person to allow in their lives when they don't heal from it, because I grew up in an abusive way and I didn't know anything else. I left with my tent and some clothes, and I camped for a very long time, and it took me a lot of soul searching and hard work to get back on my feet, but it was so worth it. I was so happy under that bridge by myself in a one-person tent in November than I was at my 5-acre farm with my gardens and my children, because I couldn't watch them suffer anymore. I tried to have him removed several times. I called the police and they never would take him because he either wasn't being physically abusive to me when I called, or in one instance I had broken his hand after he had thrown me onto the ground at least 15 times and I was covered in bruises. And so I grabbed his hand and told him that's enough, not realizing that he had fragile bones. So we both got charged. So that kind of made me shy away from asking for help during the frequent altercations we had in the years following and the multiple broken bones that I experienced. I only sought help for a few when I thought it was possibly life-threatening, or I could not function as I was supposed to because I was the only one who did anything in that house. I had tried to leave. I think it was 2016 that I got to the point where, every time I was unhappy, he would threaten to take the house and make sure I lost my kids. And my kids are the most important thing to me in my world. And so I was still afraid. And so I was desperate and I stayed because I was isolated. And I didn't know that it doesn't matter how much you want something to change for somebody. It's not going to change for them if they don't want to change it. I wanted him to learn humanity, but he didn't. My children were traumatized in ways that I can't even start to explain because, well, 2 reasons. I can't remember half of it. That's what happens to a traumatized brain. And the half that I can remember, I don't have the heart to speak. Because I was very selfish in keeping them for so long. I didn't want to lose them. Basically, all comes down to not knowing. not knowing what I am. I grew up taught to suppress my heart, my high vibration, empath light worker soul, and trained to follow my brain, my ego programming, to fit in, but I never did. This is where ignorance got me, down into the pits of hell, where I had to crawl out of my dark night of the soul. My heart could bear no more, and upon breaking, light poured in and silenced. It silenced my domineering brain, my ego. I uprooted my life and sunk my feet into the earth. It began in March 2019. It had been a terrible winter, and the only thing I had to look forward to was the cruise. We had planned a cruise that was setting sail on my birthday with my grandmother and my cousin from Germany and her husband. And it was a light in the dark for me. I had gone through about 3 years of not eating most days of the week. And when I did, it was only a few bites. I had an ulcer in my stomach rupture. I vomited blood, 2 pitchers of blood in 10 hours. Before I asked to go to the hospital, and my ex-husband actually asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. They put me into a drug-induced coma for a week. They wanted to keep me under for 2, but I woke up. They couldn't keep me under without killing me. And that's a horrible thing, to wake up on a breathing tube. Multiple broken ribs, my feet, my arms. I had my arm broken when he was driving crazy one day, and I was on my way to work, and he was being so scary on this back road that I knew there was a curve coming up that he would have to slow down. And me thinking I'm some kind of, I don't know, Indiana Jones, opens the door and thinks it's going to be like the movies, and I jumped out, and no, gravity works a lot faster than it does in the movies in real life. So I pasted to the ground, and he ran over my upper arm, and it broke in 2 places. It took me a full 38 hours, I believe, to come up with a good story that I thought was believable before I went to the hospital for this break. I told them I fell down a steep slope carrying a really heavy bucket of chicken grain, and I knew they didn't buy it, but it was the best I could come up with. One time he threw me 15 feet across my kitchen, and I tried to catch myself, and I landed my hip bone on my wrist, which broke both of my major bones, my arm, and resulted in a fragment of bone that's always going to be floating. It's painful sometimes. That's just a little bit. I don't even understand how I was duped into this. I'm a pretty smart girl, but I didn't know what an empath is. And now I do. We sailed on my birthday. I had been so sick at this point that I could barely make the 10 steps from my bedroom to my bathroom without feeling dizzy, like I was going to faint. And I hadn't been in my garden for 2 years, which, if anybody knows me, my garden and my art and my writing, those are my passions. That's it. That's all I really care about besides my children. And I was so depressed bringing my kids to school, I couldn't even go outside and spend time in the yard. I stayed in a deep, dark. I had light shutting blinds that totally blocked it out, and I just stayed in my bed. I didn't have a reason to get better. Every time I got sick or broken, it makes you weaker. And without the momentum or any happiness or anything to look forward to, it's really hard to get stronger. once you've lost your strength. And I had no idea what this cruise was going to mean to me. It should be noted that when we were standing in line to board, I got a little nervous because about 96% of that cruise was 60 and up. The average age for that cruise was 74 years old. But I didn't care. I was away from the trauma and the negativity. So we got on this ship. And about the first day, the cruise director's announcement speech, whatever, he points out the fact that 80% of people on that cruise are Aries and celebrating a birthday during the 2 weeks that we were sailing. And I found that very interesting and exciting. And I wasn't embarrassed about being weak because you can sit down anywhere you want. You only have to walk a little way and you can sit. And there's always someone to talk to. So it's not embarrassing. It's not a negative thing to rehab yourself when you're doing it for fun. And so little by little, I started going further and further, faster and faster. And I was doing laps on this ship. People would say constantly, "You're everywhere." And I said, "Yes, I am." I was at the art galleries. I was at the seminars. I was at the shows. I was at the casino to visit my grandmother. I was at the restaurants, fine dining by myself because I did not care. I was so happy. And to be honest, that cruise saved my life. It reminded me of what happy felt like because I forgot. I was so down in the pit. I forgot what happy is. I made friends with, I think, 3/4, maybe more, of that ship. Even the staff. I said I didn't want to leave. Can I have a job? And they handed me an application. And I would have filled it out and stayed there if I didn't have kids. But I lost my voice 3 days before the end of the cruise. I could not speak. That was epic. That's probably why I didn't manage to make friends with all of the people. And I felt like a celebrity, like I was loved when I was disembarking and people kept stopping me and saying they love me and thank you. And I was not used to that. I'm used to people resenting me because I have unique looks. And I guess maybe some people consider that threatening. And honestly, I'm just a farm girl. I'm an artist. I like the dirt. And so it was nice to get to know these people and see their opinions of me change. And then we got home. And that was terrible. I came home to no electricity. He didn't pay the bill. He didn't change the cat boxes. He had, I think, 18 cats that I always had a fit about. And he would not let me remove. So 2 weeks of cat boxes, 15, 18 cats, something like that. The dogs had not been cared for. So my son's bedroom is where he locked them up. Was covered in dog feces. My entire house was covered in animal feces. He had not lit the wood stove the entire time I was gone, and it snowed 3 times. My children looked like homeless vagabonds. Worse than I did when I was homeless camping. I worked for a fine restaurant when I was camping. Nobody believed it. But you don't have to look homeless if you're homeless. Not in Vermont anyway. You can find a river, get clean. But I couldn't believe it. And I tried to bring light to that dark soul. My ex-husband. For about a week. And then I couldn't anymore. I spent from April 12th until August 2nd of 2019 camping outside on my property. At first in my backyard. But then when he started coming out to harass me to clean the house and whatnot, because he wouldn't let me leave, I moved up the hill across the street where he was too lazy to come seek me out. Eventually, after that whole summer, he broke the TV, the third TV that year. I worked 24 hours a day, like 5 days a week in the garden, and then maybe 16 the other 2. I put in a stone patio. We went around getting stones from various places that were offering them for free. And there was a place in Cambridgeport that was doing some work to her property, and she had a lot of stones, and we went to get them. And he was very cruel to my children, who were working very hard to move these stones that they had no business being made to move. And he got mad at me because I wouldn't be mean to them along with him. And I disregarded him and to load the last couple stones, and me and the kids went inside because she had mentioned, this girl that I did not know mentioned that she had some shoes that her kids had outgrown, and my kids always needed shoes. So we were in there looking at the shoes, and Michael left me there. He left me a half-hour drive away from my home with my kids at a stranger's house. I waited and waited for him to come back because I couldn't believe that he wouldn't. And eventually, this lovely lady realized that he wasn't going to come back for me, and she would give me a ride home. And by the time I got home, he had unloaded all of these massive rocks from the back of his truck all over the driveway, so she couldn't even pull in to drop me off. This is a disabled man who's been collecting Social Security and got a really awesome lawsuit settlement because his back had a compression fracture back in 2014. The launch arc of these rocks, these huge stones, somebody that's disabled cannot do that. So I continued to stay outside, and then when I suddenly realized that the Old Home Day celebration in Bellows Falls was happening that weekend, because I lost track of time. Time has been totally gone for me since 2019. But I just saw it, and I told my mother if she didn't come get me and my kids to go to the fireworks, that I was going to hitchhike with the kids. And she knew I was serious. So she came and got me. And I only planned to camp in town for one night. But what happened when I was around a lot of people that weren't in that frequency that I was stuck in for a decade was I couldn't re-enter that frequency. I just could not do it. So I never went home. During the time that I was working on my garden at my property, I knew what I had to do, but my brain was shut off. So I didn't know how. My mind broke. And my heart was allowed to seep in. And I realized that no matter how much it hurts, you gotta do the right thing. Because I couldn't see my kids suffering the way they were anymore. And so I contacted the Women's Crisis Center. I did paperwork for guardianship to give my children to trusted people. I was placed in an apartment at a complex called Westview, which turned out to be a nightmare, not worse than it, nothing was worse than that, but very similar to what I was leaving, and I couldn't do it. My kids staying up 2 a.m. listening to the neighbors scream about drugs, and the police laughing about it, telling a guy to get his woman under control. That's not what I went there for. So I left back camping again. And then I started doing some soul searching. I started working in a garden of Karen Augusta. And I worked at Popolo, a fine restaurant. And I had time and the ability with my phone, finally, I had a phone, to do some research on what was going on in my head, because I did not know. So I just started with asking, why is my husband acting this way? Why does this person act this way? And it all came down to narcissism. And I said, well, I've always heard that term, but it always just seemed like calling someone an asshole, like a general asshole. But no, that's not what that is at all. There is a very serious, fine definition of a narcissist, just as there is a very, very fine definition of an empath and what they can do to each other if they encounter each other without the knowledge of it. I'm going to take a break for now, and I hope that you will check back to see part 2.